Welcome back to That Rugby podcast. You are joined by myself and Hughesy, virtual again, just for this week, and then we'll be back. Well, I'm in the office. I'm working hard in the office. Some of us,
I don't have an office at the moment, so I have to be virtual.
Some of us are moving offices, so aren't in the city, and we're not going to make Hughesy travel an hour in just to see my ugly mug in person. So fair enough, I felt. So we'll do it virtually, back in person next time. But there was some international rugby, and both of our teams got wins.
There was.
How good? How good?
Look,
Exciting
starting off,
times.
want to know. Revenge tour, starting out on a positive note.
Well, for you at least, I think I set myself up with my expectations, obviously. We talked about the last one. I said, and some could say I predicted it, because I said it wasn't good. I don't think we were going to win by as much as some was expecting. Did I expect the All Blacks versus Japan to be that close? No, I definitely did not. It's tough. I'd love to hear your opinion. I don't know if you saw the game, but I'd love to hear your opinion.
I saw bits of the game. I saw particularly the end of the game.
Yep.
Look, there was every chance it looked like that the All Blacks could lose that game, really. And the inflated scoreline, and I think it's pretty fair to call it an inflated scoreline with that superfluous 3-pointer at the end from Mo'unga, I think doesn't do justice to how well the Japanese played, really. And I think that's sort of what it comes down to, is that Japan played really well. That's the main takeaway that I had, is that Japan is on an upswing.
Yeah, and that's a good take, and that's what I think is. So many people are going to get taken away and get caught up in the All Blacks were bad, that they're taking an unfair, expectation away from this game, that I think the Japanese were really good. Now, there was a moment there, it was like, I think it was about 21-19 and this was before Japan had scored their first try, where I kind of went, we made a couple of other big breaks and just about scored and didn't. And I think if we had scored there, we would have run away with the game. Then they scored, and it was that Japanese fight where if you don't put this team away, they will sneak up and surprise you. So I think, to me as an All Blacks fan, I actually really enjoyed the game, because what Japan do really well is they defend very similar to England, and I enjoyed the game, but I didn't enjoy the game, and it gave me PTSD. Purely because it made me remember that semi-final against England and how they defended us. It's up in your face. Yep. It's very quick. South Africans do it, but they do it with like their shooters at their nines, and they do a slightly different defensive style. Japan was very much what I expect we're going to see from England. And I think it was a good learning curve. I think the All Blacks actually will take more from that game than if they'd pumped them by 50 points. We learnt yet again how to play with 14 men in the bin. We learnt Roger Tuivasa-Sheck is more than capable at this level. And just a couple other points.
He looked very good.
Yeah, there was a couple other points like that I think we took away. We learnt, and we already knew this, that Sam Cane, although may not be the complete package of a rugby player, is one hard motherfucker, because can play on with a broken cheekbone or whatever he did, fractured cheekbone, for the last 10 minutes to make sure we secured victory. So there were lots of things I think we learnt, but again, there was a lot of heightened where I was like, I got nervous. I was nervous there, but I think we also have to remember that this was the 10th best team in the world. This isn't like Japan isn't no more in Italy. This is Japan are there, and they've knocked over some big teams.
Yep.
Eventually, they will knock over the All Blacks. It's a matter of when, not if anymore, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I think it's a great sort of example, like the rise of Japan and Argentina. We're seeing the growth of international rugby teams into competitive forces, becoming just better and better teams as the players get better and better, as the coaching gets better and better at those levels. And I guess that's particularly frustrating as a Wallabies fan. I saw a comment on one of our clips from last week's podcast where you and I were sort of going on about the revenge tour, and someone commented on there, I think it's just that you guys struggle with the fact that the Northern Hemisphere teams are better than the Southern Hemisphere teams like you guys, and it's going to get even worse when South Africa joins the Six Nations. And I agree with that comment, but what I sort of half agree, because what I think it is that talent-wise, I don't think the Northern Hemisphere teams are better. I think their parity there's parity in the skill levels there, particularly for the All Blacks, where you look across the field and everyone's an amazing player. But even the Wallabies, you look at the talent levels of the individual players, and it's amazing. However, it's what I think it is it's the coaching, the discipline, and the effort where the Northern Hemisphere teams have got it, which is very frustrating to think like we've got these great players, but our at the moment, our coaching and our discipline isn't as good as those Northern Hemisphere teams. And I think Japan is a fantastic example of looking what great coaching and discipline, how competitive that can make you against a tremendously talented team. And it goes back to the old adage, it's better to be a champion team than a team of champions.
100%. And I love that you touched on coaching, because I think right now I look at it and I go, I think the Japanese coaching staff is the best in the world. When you've got Jamie Joseph linking with Tony Brown, and Tony Brown, everyone knows what Tony Brown can bring and do to a team. And then they've added John Mitchell, with World Cup experience back in 2003 for the All Blacks. So I just look around and I go, man, that's a coaching staff and a half, and that'll be really interesting when they come up to England. And I know Jamie Joseph went out and said, this was a good game, but realistically our test is going to be against England when we come up against a better team. And did that strike a little knife into my heart? Yeah, it did, for coming from a New Zealander and Jamie Joseph. But I mean, he's not 100% wrong there, but I hope he gets proven wrong and the Japanese go over and win and beat the English. But yeah, it was a bit of a wake up call, I think, for the world of rugby. And I think it was a wake up call, but it was a perfectly timed wake up call, because we discussed it on this, obviously, this podcast a lot. The biggest competitor to rugby is rugby league. Two very similar sports. Right now, rugby league's got their World Cup going on, where we've seen nothing but absolute slaughter. 90-10 score lines, and we just had our first team best team in the world play our 10th best and win by 7 points, 4 points realistically. And I kind of go, That was a great, for all the poor advertisements rugby, that was a great advertisement rugby. The game was fantastic. The running rugby there, the ref didn't control the game, I don't think. If anything, the Japanese gave away like double as many penalties. So you sit there and you go, it was just a great advertisement for rugby. As an All Blacks fan, obviously it hurts not to smash 100%. Them, but it was a great advertisement for rugby.
Exactly right. And I think it's as much as rugby league is competitive to the Rugby World Cup, we're seeing those results in the Rugby League World Cup. And I see a lot of people asking, well, why do we even bother having the Rugby League World Cup? It's because then eventually you get the results like what we're getting now. By including those smaller nations, they will get better. They need the representation. They need the experience to improve and get onto the bigger stage. And I'm just looking at the pools for the Rugby World Cup. And yeah, this Pool D is going to be incredible. England, Japan, and Argentina in there, along with Samoa and Chile.
That's an
England, Japan,
outrageous
Argentina.
pool.
And then Pool B, South Africa, Ireland, and Scotland. I mean, it's a good transition to get into the Wallabies and Scotland game, but that's going to be a tough pool as well, along with Tonga and Romania. Pool A, New Zealand, France, Italy, Uruguay, and Namibia. And then Pool C, Wales, Australia, Fiji, Georgia. And then it says final qualifier winner, though I think that's the US at this stage. Is that right?
I don't think it hasn't finished yet.
Yeah,
it hasn't finished yet. Yeah.
But. So that's, again, another pool. I feel like Australia always seems to end up in the same pool as Wales.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, you do love a pool.
Let's
of
look.
Wales.
Yeah. Let's look at the Wallabies Scotland game now. I guess, I watched I saw live the end of this game and the missed kick from Kinghorn to keep the Wallabies in front. Really, I guess this is a tough one. It's a tough one to dissect, but I said it last week. You called how the New Zealand Japan game would go. I pretty much called how this game is going to be low scoring, gritty, tough, and miserable, much like Scotland and the weather there. And it was a tough, gritty game. I liked some of the open, expansive play I saw from the Wallabies early, particularly from Kellaway and Tate McDermott. And I think, we saw the whole Rugby Championship. We didn't really see Tate McDermott at all. It was the Bernard Foley, Jake Gorda show. But I think Tate McDermott sort of had a bit of a chip on his shoulder and came out and showed why he should be in the conversation for the Wallabies number 9 going into the World Cup. Although Nick White had a brilliant kick to end the game where he drop kick bounced out of bounds right between a couple of Scottish players. Excellent play, but I love Jake Gordon, don't get me wrong, and he's played fantastically for the Wallabies this year, but I feel like he's number 3. I think it's a tight 3 between McDermott, White, and Gordon, so if there's any injuries, you've got serviceable players to fill in there, but Tate McDermott just provides that youth and energy out of the position that... it's maybe not that Nick White or Jake Gordon lack, but it's just he has more of it. He's got more of that amplified energy. And if you're going to have an experienced 10, it's good to have sort of a live wire 9. I think like you need. I feel like your 9 and 10, a youthful and experienced pairing is a really great option to have. But yeah, I love what I saw of Andrew Kellaway. I feel like he's really solidifying himself as one of the Australian wingers. And you're going into next year when we get Corabetti back will be great, and that was a talk point going into this game is Scotland without some of their best players. Hogg obviously because there's the English rugby season going on now. They were saying how he played for Exeter or something during the week, so that's why he's not available here. Australia's without a couple of their top 2 players, I would argue, in Karevi and Corabetti. Yeah. So feel like there's, both sides undermanned here. I love what I saw out of our locks in Nick Frost and Caden Neville as well, particularly Frost. And I saw that you rated him quite highly as well in your MVP ladder as well. Where I think we were sort of surprisingly let down a bit was Hunter Paisami, I think, had a very average game, which is not something we usually say about him, but I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about our centers and where we're going when we don't have Karevi available. But I guess overall, look, a win's a win. And I saw an article that said, if we're going to scrutinize Dave Rennie for having a terrible win-loss record, we should give the wins as much weight as the losses. Like if he's getting these narrow losses, but we're all saying, oh well, there's still a loss, there's no moral victories. Well then, if he's got a victory here, he's got a victory. The team's earned it. And look, we've got a new segment here, and I guess it's again a good transition to go into that segment. We've got Hughesy's Star of the Week.
Hughesy's
and my
star this week.
Oh. My star this week is the indefatigable number 10 for the Wallabies, Bernard Foley, right? And I think the matchup here against Blair Kinghorn is an excellent highlight for why I've got Foley as my player of the week. Now, Kinghorn was everywhere for Scotland, right? Setting up tries, scoring a try himself and everything like that, being great number 10, but he couldn't make his kicks. Foley, he made... I believe I saw a mistake for the Wallabies where he was sort of threw a ball into his own leg when he was under pressure. But he made his kicks. He was solid. He did his job. And that's the important thing at the end of the day, right? If Kinghorn, I believe, missed 2 kicks, either of those kicks made, Scotland wins. It's as simple as that. And that's what you need out of your 10 is you need to be consistent, right? So Kinghorn had highs and he had lows in this game. Bernard Foley, he had highs and lows as well, but they were much more on a center line. He was much more consistent throughout the game, and that's why I'm highlighting Foley here. And now you might be thinking, that's a bit weird to have just someone who was consistent as your star player, but that's what you need. That's what got the Wallabies the win at the end of the day was Foley making all of his kicks, right?
Yep.
You could talk about, Kellaway doing his fancy kick down the sideline, chasing the ball, putting in the effort. You can talk about James Slipper getting that great try. That was amazing. Well, and Nick Frost doing the offload. But at the end of the day, if Bernard Foley doesn't make his kicks, if he misses one kick, Wallabies don't win. And that's what a winning team does, is they make their kicks. In the game that the Wallabies beat the Springbok this year, what happened in that game? Springbok missed a bunch of kicks. The Wallabies made theirs. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day, is when you have points available, getting those points and not missing those opportunities. That's why Foley is my star of the week, because when called upon, he delivered in high-pressure situations, as he always does. It's why he's the Iceman. It's why the Waratahs won the Super Rugby against the Crusaders. I'm always going to bring it back to that. That's why Foley's a star of the week. It's what he is known for. He was called upon to do his job. He did his job. He delivered. Australia starts off their tour 1-0. They're that much closer to ice cream.
Yeah, Totally agree. I mean, there's a lot of good points you've mentioned of that Australian game. I went back and rewatched it. I think Tate McDermott, when he is on, and he doesn't often have bad games. I just feel like, they've been building him to these moments, and I think that's your combo. I think that's your 1-2 punch combo. And as much as you see, I like Gordon, and I thought again for the Waratahs, he was unreal this past season.
Yeah.
But I think McDermott to start off a game and White to finish it with his experience, I think works really well. I was a massive fan of Nick Frost and what he got around the park. 18 tackles is never easy for a lock, and a couple of line-out steals to go with it. We're forever talking about your locks, and if he can turn into quite the player, I think there's potential there to kind of stop one of your weaknesses, and you've got, this is discussing when we've got Will Skelton coming into the group. So like that's a massive thing to take a step in that direction. You talk about Hunter Pasami, and I know, he didn't have his best performance. And we talked about Creevy and stuff being out, but it seems like he's always, been out since that Auckland one, the English series. And it's just because, obviously it's a long injury and we won't see him again until next year. So, you kind of think, like you said, I had forgotten about them. Like, it feels like Australia, the Wallabies have taken that within their stride, whereas a team like Scotland, when they lose their two best players, it seems to hurt them more when it shouldn't, because their two best players were just about, the two players that replaced those two players. So it was an interesting perspective, a massive win for you lot. I mean, first time in 4 years you've beaten the Scots in Scott or whatever it was in 4 attempts. That's a massive, like you said, any win is massive in this area at the moment. And in the most competitive era of international rugby, any win is a big win at the moment. So you definitely take that to start off your series going into that French game where like we said, we don't know what side they're going to name. And if they do take it slightly light, need to have that win behind your back is 100% a good thing to have. And I guess
I'd like to see Fiketti on the field a bit more.
Oh, yeah.
Like in the games that he played in the Rugby Championship, he was, for the little experience in the green and gold that he's had, he sort of stood out to me. I would like to see him see the field a little bit more. I guess for me as well, like with this tour, and with Hunter Paisami, like I guess we know the player that he is and how good he is and how good he can be. I think we are still seeing how good Fiketti could be. So I would like to see him see the field a bit more. Even Ikitau, we know how good he is now. I'd like to sort of see a bit more of the exploration of some of the players that are a bit newer into the Wallabies system. And look, we might not see that against France. Like Scotland, I think you could say was probably like a dress rehearsal game for the game against France. But into the latter half, where we've got Italy, Ireland, Wales, in that Italy game, I think we said it before, that's going to be probably the time when there's the most switch-ups is that test.
Yep.
And maybe the Wales one to close out the series. But yeah, I'd like to see a little bit more exploration there, because you can only it can only be good to get these players experience in green and gold, because even if you lose the game, you at least see what they can put on the field. You know what you have then, and you know that, okay, we need to focus more on building around these players because these players aren't suitable. Or you see, hey, these guys can really thrive. They add a different element. They've got great instincts about them, etc., etc. We'll start to put them into the system a bit more.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100% agree. There were a couple incidents in both of our teams' games. Now, the Brodie Retallick red card, and then I forgot his name, I think it was Glenn, the Scottish yellow card. Very, very similar incidents where it's a clean out, they've gone in for the clean out, led with the shoulder, made contact with the head. I mean, when you look at both of them, there's not...
It was Glenn Young.
Glenn Young, was it? That was Glenn Young. Yeah, sorry if his last name was Glenn. When you look at them, both of them probably side by side, you can make an argument for them being as bad as each other. I think it's... And we've discussed this on the podcast. I remember we mentioned it with Bundy Aki, and I asked, what does he meant to do there? I think it's becoming one of the heightened points. I think we're starting to understand tackle technique's easy, because tackle technique is controllable. Like, you go into a tackle, you just got to get lower. when we're going into these rucks, it is so hard to control because the opponent is already so low. Both of those incidents, the player's bridging over the ball. Now, some will say, well, you can't lead with the shoulder then, you've come too late. This is something that we haven't, we've been told by World Rugby for so long, we're going to get high tackles out of the game, any hit contact from high tackles out of the game. That's already been 2, 3, 4 years now. We're really starting to notice this duo of cleanouts and red cards, or cleanouts and at least yellow cards, and it's becoming a big factor, I think, in rugby. From my perspective, I am so unsure of what they can do, because I look there and I look at Brodie Retallick's one and I go, yes, it's a card. I understand what World Rugby is. I understand what the ref has to do. You can definitely say, you could say it's a red, but I just, like, the Japanese player, man, just picked him up and pretty much threw him off him. And I was like, to me, it just doesn't sit right still when you're losing a player because of that. I don't know. Like, I've sat here and since that red card and even since seeing the yellow one in your guys' game, I don't know if there's a way to do it without, you just can't lead with that shoulder. I just really haven't been able to find another way around it.
Yeah, I will say, watching part of the Wallabies game, the referee in the game, Luke Pearce, even though I know there's a lot of people unhappy with his decision to not send off Glenn Young, and understandable. We've seen now 2 other examples of that with the Bundyaki and then Brodie Retallick of this is a red card. I do sometimes think there is over refereeing of games with those things, and he provided a good example of that with late in the game, Hunter Paisami went to intercept a ball, it fell to the ground. Now, we've seen in previous test series, particularly Australia versus England, that's almost an automatic yellow. I really like the review process they did for this knockdown, where they said, look, yeah, he's going for the ball, but he's knocked it down. It's a penalty, but it's not a yellow card, because we could see that there was a supporting player behind him, so that way it's not a yellow card, because it wouldn't have been a scoring situation or a big play situation because there was other defenders in there. They're taking in those other circumstances, those sort of common sense circumstances, that it's like, that's a great thing to look at and to take into consideration. I really like the way that they refereed that decision, where it's like, yeah, fair enough, penalty, sure. I mean, even then, I would say still arguably it should just be a knock on, right? Because he's trying to go for an intercept of the ball. But I get why it's a penalty as well. I'll take the penalty over a yellow card, basically. If we've got to step it down from yellow card to penalty, I'll take it, right? But yeah, particularly situations like that where it is, as Archie said, what am I supposed to do there? How are you supposed to play it? Not then sending them off for a red. I don't know. It's a tough one because we want to eliminate the head contact, but at the same time, you need to be able to clear out a ruck. Exactly. You need to be able to clear out before a ruck's formed, and it's hard to know what to do. Like, I think you said it really well. Tackling, it's easy to have the technique there because at the end of the day, to tackle someone, they're going to be upright, or relatively upright. You could always sort of get lower than them because you don't need to keep running. You just need to stop them from running. However, when you're trying to clear someone out, they're already on the ground, really. They can get really, really low. You're the one that's then moving forward that needs momentum to shift someone. So how are you supposed to get under them if they don't need to keep moving, right? What are you supposed to do there? How is that supposed to work? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have the answers. I always hate seeing cards, especially red cards, where a player's out for the whole game, right? And then you're always playing with a man down.
Yeah.
I think that takes away from the quality of the game.
The way I always kind of see it,
I don't have the answer.
It's so hard because, let's say, when you're thinking about a red card offence, the ref isn't obviously taking this into account, but I take it into account. If this happened in the first minute of a Rugby World Cup final, would I be happy that red card has taken place? If you know what I mean. So, like, I look at the Bundyaki one or even the Brodie Retallick, and I'm like, man, to tell me that you're going to first minute in a Rugby World Cup final send someone off for that doesn't sit right. Like for 79 minutes of a game, someone being there, you throw a punch here. Good riddance, if you know what I mean. You do something dirty, I get it. I can sit here and go, yep, you deserve to be in the bin, you had a brain explosion. That wasn't a Brodie Retallick brain explosion, you know what I mean? It was just, it's hard. It is so hard at the moment, and I'm going to put the question out to our followers, to anyone out there, if you have an idea, if you know, is it just that, okay, now they've got to go in, and because even going in for the role, if you end up in the wrong position with the role, it's now a neck roll, and it's like, what can we do to stop the head contact in a ruck, but not increase red cards or have to change rugby to a whole point where we're just doing a play the ball in its league now. So if you know what I mean, like what can we do, followers out there? Anyone, I'll take any ideas for $100. The best idea. But yeah, I just I'm dumbfounded. Like I am. I'm like, it's not a bad call. I don't want to say it was a bad call by the referee because it wasn't. But I don't know how we can improve on this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's. I know what you mean. It's a tough one, and as I said, we don't have the solution here, but we need to put the solution out there. We need to put the problem out there for it to be discussed, and it's good that it is being discussed. Innovation is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it's innovation around player safety, but also keeping the game entertaining for people to watch, right? And I know there's the crowd out there that is, innovation for innovation's sake is bad. And to some degree, I agree with that, but that's not applicable to this situation, right? Yeah. There needs to be some sort of change here. But look, what it comes down to at the end of the day is that with those, both of our teams got their first win of their tour, although I guess the New Zealand game doesn't really count as part of the tour, but whatever. They're not playing in New Zealand as a tour,
exactly.
Right? So Southern Hemisphere, the ANZAC Brigade.
Yep.
2-0 start
baby.
Out. So yeah, this is probably the only time we'll both be happy for each other's team's success.
Yeah, on the Northern Tour is the only time. I'd like you to get a win, or if you're winning us.
I mean, it's somewhat in the Rugby Championship. It depends on the
situations. Right? Yeah, I'll support the Wallabies if it means South Africa lose and we win the Rugby Championship.
Yeah, exactly. The situations like that. Whereas this whole tour, it'll be wholehearted support behind both teams. Yeah. So
up the ANZACs. Up the ANZACs.
Yeah. The only exception to that was, I will have to say, and this is where I'm saying the Japan game doesn't count as part of the tour, was I was hoping Japan would get a win there. More for Japan than being anti-New Zealand, if you know what I mean. Yeah, and that's not part of the tour. Now, when you're going into all these other games, 100% behind the All Blacks.
Yeah. 100% behind the Wallabies. It's to say, but I don't think I'd ever say that, but I am, because I'm so on this revenge tour together that I really hope that the Northern Hemisphere crumbles and we come back 9-0. And as we tick over the wins, we'll be letting everyone know, because I'm going to remember that man's comment, the Northern Hemisphere are getting good. We'll see. Saying this duo, me and you, obviously coming together to support each other in this time, red cards and the ruck, I thought, let's go through some of the best duos in rugby history. Now, I've written down a few. If you've got any, let me know. But I'd start off with Hooper and Pocock, the best duo of number sevens. If you could have two number sevens on the field, I legitimately think the Wallabies should have tried this, is actually taken out the number 8 position and just had two sevens in the flank during the scrum time. I think that would have been a great watch, because that's exactly what you needed. Like, it was two sevens, and you just unfortunately didn't really have a position for the other seven, but two of the best sevens on the park at the same time is incredible.
Yeah, both amazing players, and both incredible figures in Australia, both on and off the field. Hooper recently with his mini sabbatical for mental health reasons, and then Pocock obviously now in the Australian Senate with issues affecting Australia beyond rugby. So definitely. Both inspirational on and off the field as well. So they're pretty high up there for duos for me.
Yeah, I'd imagine so. A couple of duos that are high up there for me are obviously the Nonu and Smith, famous All Black centres who played, I think it was just about 100 games together. Like, it was something ridiculous. I think it was the most games combination for a centre pairing ever, was Nonu and Smith, and Carter and McCaw. Now, Carter and McCaw have an up and down relationship, because every time they wear the black jersey, they're two of my most favourite rugby players in the world. Every time they wear a red and black jersey, I couldn't despise two players any more than it was Carter and McCaw. But that was a duo that wherever they went, greatness followed, it seemed. So that was a duo. Another duo I've got is Bucky's Bofa and Being Dirty. Have you seen a dirtier rugby player on the field? I don't know if I have. I would never obviously say this to this face, because he scares the living bejeebers out of me, but that was one I thought was a great duo. And then the last duo I've got written down is Brian Lima and Folding Opponents, obviously known as the Samoan hitman, Brian Lima, who loves to fold an opponent. Any duos that I've missed out that you particularly like, my friend?
Yeah, there's I guess like this is more just for my nostalgia more than anything else. Really, and I'm going to bring it back to the
Bernard Foley and a game-winning kick.
Yeah, exactly right. Bernard Foley and a game-winning kick. The Iceman himself. Yeah, I mean, he's a clutch player. He's just clutch. No, I actually quite like the combination within that squad of Adam Ashley Cooper and Rob Horn in the centres. I thought that was a underrated part of that Waratahs team. A lot of attention was paid to Israel Folau in the fullback position, right? And rightfully so. He was a great player. However, I think that centre pairing was just exceptional during that season and really set up a lot for the outside backs. For the likes of Folau, for the likes of Nayavoro. There were two great players. I love Adam Ashley Cooper, who's one of my favourite Australian players for all time. I don't know if you put him up there on sort of all-time duos, particularly when you're looking at the international. But when you're looking at Super Rugby, that 2014 Waratahs team was on another level. On another level.
I like that. I like a little bit of hometown.
You want to know?
Yep.
You want to know something interesting about that 2014 Waratahs team?
Share it with me, my friend.
Both Dave Parecki and Andrew Kellaway were on that team.
Wow, that's an interesting fact. I'll have to do some photo searching and see if I can find them.
I don't think they played very much, but they were on the team.
Wow.
My favourite player though from that team is one of two non-Australians in that team, and that's Jacques Potgieter. Big Safa second rower.
Yeah.
Just love that man. He brought such a great energy to the Waratahs.
He did. And wouldn't you love to have a jersey with his name on the back?
I would have loved to have a jersey with Jacques Potgieter's name on the back. I would love to have a jersey with Adam Ashley Cooper's name on the back. AAC, amazing. Michael Hooper, a jersey with the Hooper on the back would be iconic, I think.
Now, I don't want to say that we discussed this in one of our podcasts recently about, because there was numbers on the back of random numbers on the back of a rugby league team's jersey, and I said you need at least names, and we've already discussed it. If you have names on the back, it's a selling point. Now, rugby unions, I don't think will ever go into the facet of what rugby league has with random numbers, and you can just choose your number. I think it'll always be 1 to 24. Oh, I say always be 1 to 23. I remember the days when it was 1 to 22 and your halfback wore 20, and that never happens anymore. But yes, 1 to 23. Yeah. But the English team I know is wearing jerseys with names on their back coming up for this weekend. Which I think is a fantastic idea. I love the idea. There is again, the critics that'll say, and a lot of people say it within rugby circles, you're just renting the jersey or just borrowing it. So it's not yours to own. But when you've got it and it's yours, it is for that moment, it is yours. And I think it's a big respect to put your name on the back, and I think it'll be awesome. There'll be a lot of kids running around with, Farrell on the back of theirs, or Laws or a Tojay on the back. And I think it's just another selling point that we've said, you want to sell more jerseys, that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, I get what the sort of tradition is of, you don't own that jersey, you're just renting it for a bit. And I get that's really sort of, I think, is meant to impart some history down to the players to have, to play for something that little bit extra. Like, All Blacks flankers, anyone that puts on Richie McCaw's jersey is always good. That jersey belongs to Richie McCaw and all the fantastic players that have gone before him. You look at number 9 for Australia. That is a George Gregan jersey, basically. Like, these are probably the most iconic halfback for the Wallabies. I think even now Michael Hooper has made the 7 jersey his for the Wallabies as well. So I get that as well. However, I think that still can happen, and also have names to the back of jerseys and have those be marketable, right?
Yep.
I mean, that is such a huge resource potential for rugby, right? When you look at sports like your NBA, soccer, NFL particularly, right?
Yep.
And NFL is, I think, a great example because they've got retired numbers for those exceptional players. Now, that's not going to happen for rugby because we have our positions and that's the numbers that you have. And I think we've seen what's happened with Rugby League and this Rugby League World Cup and the Kangaroos there having numbers all over the place representing the, ranking them on their years of service to the Kangaroos and whatnot. And what a joke that is, really. Like, that's just confusing as all hell.
Yep.
So you're not going to retire numbers for rugby, but you can see in the NFL the importance of jersey numbers and how people respect those numbers, even when they then adopt the jersey themselves. A great example is the number 88 for the Dallas Cowboys, right? Iconic wide receivers from there: Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, Des Bryant, and now CD Lamb. And they even have they've had like a couple of YouTube videos together, the 88 Club, where they talked about the jersey and what that means and how it made them play harder as well. They all had their names on the back of the jersey. It doesn't take anything away from that number 88 jersey that other players have put that jersey on. So I think you can have it. You can still have the respect for the history of the jersey and put the player names on it. And I think it would only be good for rugby.
Definitely.
Right? And as well, for your casual fans, how much easier is it to see, like, a lot of people know the name Michael Hooper. A lot of casual viewers of rugby might not know what he looks like if they don't watch all that often. But you see a jersey with the name Hooper on the back, oh, okay, that's Michael Hooper, right?
Yep.
And you don't have to explain to people, like, oh, who is that running in number 12? And when you're looking at teams that you don't normally play, like, when Australia plays against a Scotland or a Wales, or when we're coming up to this World Cup, Australia's the same pool as Fiji and Georgia as well. And then I looked into who the qualifying teams are. It's Kenya, Portugal, USA, and Hong Kong.
Yep.
So, none of those regularly play rugby. I'm not going to know all the players in those teams. It gives you that much more accessibility to the game. And I could say from having commentated rugby games as well, it would make it so much easier on the commentators to have names on the back of the jerseys, right? Rather than having to look at a team list the whole time if you're not familiar with the whole team. It's much easier to commentate a game where you know one of the teams because then that team, I know what that player looks like. But when you're looking at the opposition, you're like, I've got no idea who this guy is, right? Yep. And for the commentators for the upcoming Rugby World Cup, none of them are going to have covered all of these teams before, right? It is a massive challenge, right? And now I'm not that commentators need any sympathy or anything like that, but I think overall it opens up accessibility for the game. It opens up marketing and merchandise sales, and it adds a little bit of extra legacy for the players. I don't know. For me, I feel like sometimes rugby is too tradition bound. And I know I said before, innovation for innovation's sake isn't necessarily a good thing. In this case, I think it's innovation for positive reasons that will make positive changes to rugby, not just, because it's something that other people do. I think there's reasons behind why other people do it. It works. Do it.
Totally agree with all the points you've just said there, my friend. So hopefully, we see more teams picking it up. Talking earlier in the podcast, I know we said how great it was in a spectacle of a close game from your first or fourth ranked team to your 10th ranked team. The women's quarterfinals were quite the opposite of that. 4 quite large victories. So we had France first up to defeat Italy 39-3. The Black Ferns defeat Wales 55-3. The Wallaroos World Cup come to a crashing end against England 41-5. And Canada beat USA for the second time in a week, 32-11, to set up the semi-finals of Canada versus England and the Black Ferns versus France. How do you feel now the Wallaroos World Cup campaign is over? Any debrief, any thoughts for you, mate?
Look, it's tough because... and again, I think rugby needs to learn from NRL here, where NRL has just announced a massive deal with Westpac, where Westpac is going to be the game ball sponsor for the NRL and the NRLW. Now, I think the broadcast around the Women's World Cup has been good from Stan, from the streaming service, but I think obviously the Wallaroos are semi-professional, right? They're not paid like the English team is or the French team is. And we clearly saw the difference in talent levels there. Even the Black Ferns, they're semi-professional, I believe, but they are so talented that they're able to sort of
they're fully professional. To be fair, they are fully professional. They're the highest paid players. Okay, so they you can tell.
The Black Ferns are.
Yep, they're paid more than
there you go.
Than the English team. So yeah, it's the 4 teams you have left all have. Canada are the highest of semi-pros, of high semi-pros, but yeah, you got 4 fully paid players.
Oh, well, so. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about the Wallaroos then. Look, you could see that even highlights my point even further. You can see the difference that being professional makes, and I think there's a growing market. There's a lot of people that are interested in watching the women's game because of the level of skill involved there, and I think honestly, you get to see a little bit. The game's a bit more free flowing. It's not as decided by, I guess, sort of penalties and mistakes and ill discipline like the men's game is sometimes. And yeah, look, just pay the ladies, right? It's
pay the ladies. Pay the ladies.
That's it. At the end of the day, just pay the ladies.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it shows. The final 4 teams, like you were just saying, 3 of them are 100% fully paid players. Canada, I think, are still semi-pro, but have a very decent team. So, and this is the top 4 teams. So we've come to get to the World Cup. We expected that these 4 teams would make it through, and they have. We've got a hell of a showdown now. New Zealand on home soil against the French. The French did us over the last time we toured at the end of last year. So it'll be interesting to see. I feel like we've built really well, and the way we put Wales to the sword was, fantastic. So it'll be a good game. And then Canada, you expect England to win that one, but you never know what can happen. Canada have shown they have some strength. Whoever wins, it's going to be a fantastic final. And I can guarantee you I will be watching the final as well. I can tell you that because I've been, thoroughly enjoying this Women's World Cup, and I will be watching the New Zealand versus France and then the final 100%. Now, let's talk about the upcoming games for the international rugby. Coming up Saturday morning, Friday night over in Europe. It is Ireland A versus the New Zealand XV, which I think will be a very interesting game, just with the history of these 2 teams. Obviously, Ireland A came over and played New Zealand Māori when they were in New Zealand, and now playing the New Zealand XV. This is going to be interesting to see the depth of both teams and tested there for a Saturday morning. Then we've got Scotland trying to bounce back against Fiji, Italy against Samoa, Wales against New Zealand, Ireland against South Africa, France against Australia, England against Argentina. The big games, should I say. There's also some smaller teams. But yeah, so obviously you're taking on France, your team, the Wallabies, in the 7 a.m. game. Thoughts beliefs? Do you think you have the ability to do it? Are you actually going to be able to follow up your aunt, your boys? Are they?
Look, this is the thing, is what I said before. The Wallabies have got the ability, right? It's nothing to do with ability. I think it's to do with discipline, and sometimes to do with effort. Mostly, though, to do with discipline.
Yep.
So, have they got the ability to do it? Absolutely. Have they got the discipline to do it? Maybe. They nearly lost that game against Scotland from an ill-disciplined play from Taniela Tupou giving away that penalty at the end. Like, I could see the thoughts, but look, if it seems like it's too easy, it probably is too easy. So, yeah, they've got the talent for sure. We saw that last year in the French tour here, right? You know, yeah, sure, France didn't have all the best players, but whatever. Australia's got the talent to do it. It's the discipline, effort, and coaching, which I question.
Yeah.
But look, it's revenge tour. They've got everything to play for. Ben and Jerry's ice cream. So yeah,
up the ANZACs. Yep. I
exactly right.
If there was ever a time to pick off France, I think it's the first game up. So yeah, that wouldn't be surprised if Australia can actually do the French. I think the All Blacks do Wales. We did that last year when we played them first up. But to say I'm going in overly confident, probably not right. I think we'll see a stronger team come out. Our line-out was woeful. So Sam Whitelock being back will be a massive pickup. Also, Sam Cane being out means we get a good look at Dalton Papali'i, or even potentially, which I would like to see, is a combo of Ardie Savea at 7 and Hoskins Tutu at 8. I would love to see Ardie move back into that 7 jersey just to see. But, I mean, yeah, that's going to be the big thing. When the teams get named and we can sit there and go, wow, okay, this is the first real week. You know, you had just the Scotland, Australia, and New Zealand, but this feels like to a time.
Yeah, and on that as well, we talked about last week, like the All Blacks team being named, and we talked about how the New Zealand Super Rugby teams were going to be named. I kept my eye out for when the Wallabies team was named. It was at 10 o'clock at night, like Australian time. No. And I get it, because they've got to base it off the you know, when, because they were over in Scotland, like base it off when Rennie got up that morning and named the team. But still, 10 p.m. at night, no fanfare whatsoever. Like, at least, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Either do it the night before. I think you do it the night before. Rennie's going to bed. Right before he goes to bed, writes down the team list so that when the Australians wake up, we all see, oh, there's the team list. Let's have a discussion about it all day. And the next morning, Rennie can get up on his podium and talk through his team list and discuss it that way. And you've had a whole day of discussion about the Wallabies at the, you know, water cooler moments where you're at the office and people are like, hey, you see the Wallabies team named this morning? You know, Nick Frost and Caden Neville at the lock position. Tate McDermott starting at 9.
Mental. That is
10
mental.
p.m. at night, like a tweet and a social media post. It's like, what the fuck's going on?
That's crazy, because that was like the talk of rugby in New Zealand was, you know, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck starting, you know, like this happening, Stephen Putafeta at the back. Like it's, Australian rugby. I don't want to get too deep into it because you guys are your own worst enemy sometimes. Let's not beat around the bush, you know, like you can sit there and say the All Blacks beat you for 20 straight years, but sometimes you are your worst enemy. All right, just be better. All right.
Sometimes we're our worst enemies. Sometimes it's a French referee is our worst enemy.
Sometimes you get ice cream if you win enough games.
Exactly right.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Once teams get named, make sure you're following us on Instagram, TikTok, all the good stuff to, you know, get our up to dates on the moment, on the buzz, updates for everything.
And arguably better graphically designed team lists than some of the social media posts put out there.
I try. But yeah, I think that's all for the rugby world at the moment.
Yeah, I think so. I think we covered everything. I think there's nothing out there that we possibly didn't.
Did you like my video of the Blair Kingston the miss kick? And I linked. I put Happy Gilmore. I thought that had to be perfect going with it.
It was great. And then the Happy Gilmore 25-year anniversary, it lined up so well. You know. Unlike Kinghorn's kick.
That's a good way to leave it. We will be back again next week to wrap up all of these games, wrap up the semi-finals for the Women's World Cup. Maybe try and get some questions in from you guys as well to answer. I may put that out for questions for some podcasts so we can answer, because I want to ask you the question about what we do with these breakdowns and red cards. So if I'm going to ask you a question, we'll accept some questions, won't we, Hughesy? We will go from there. But for now, thank you for joining us on this podcast. We will talk to you next time. See ya.
Peace.